Now that we have finished learning about the ancient Greek civilization, we are going to move into a new unit called Greek myths. Over the next several lessons, we're going to hear many well-known Greek myths, or myths that originated in ancient Greece. These myths include several fascinating characters, many of whom are gods and goddesses who were worshipped by the ancient Greeks. Today's read aloud is called The 12 Gods of Mount Olympus. Do you remember which continent the ancient Greek civilization was located? It was on the continent of Europe that you see in red, right here in this small circle. Remember, Greece today occupies a very small area, but it was once the center of a very large civilization. Once we zoom in to that circled area, we can see just how large the area of ancient Greece really was. Ancient Greece spread from the Black Sea all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, including Crete. Let's take a moment to review some of the things we learned about the ancient Greek civilization. We have learned about their jobs. They had farming, shepherding, and seafaring. We also learned about the city-states of Sparta and Athens. A couple key leaders were Pericles and Alexander the Great. The people of this civilization worshipped many gods and goddesses and built temples in honor of the gods. And lastly, they had many contributions. These consisted of the Olympic Games, art and architecture, and also the ideas of the philosophers Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Like people in many civilizations, the ancient Greeks told stories orally or by word of mouth. In ancient times, people did not have the knowledge that people have today. So as a result, these stories, which were later written down, were first thought to be factual, but it is now known that they are fictional or not true. We call such oral stories myths. Here are some characteristics of Greek myths. They try to explain something in nature or teach a lesson. They have mythical creatures. They can have Greek gods and goddesses in the story. They can also provide insight into the ancient Greek culture. Let's meet the characters in today's story, The 12 Gods of Mount Olympus. This image shows some of the Greek gods and goddesses. In today's story, you will hear the names of each of these gods and goddesses and learn a little bit about them. We will also hear about Cyrus and his son Leonidas, who are going to the foot races at Olympia to sell their pottery. Let's take a look at some vocabulary words for today's read aloud. The first word is sanctuary. A holy place, a safe, protected place. Spectators. Observers, people watching an event. And the last word is tending. Taking care of or caring for someone or something. As we read, I want you to listen carefully to find out the 12 main gods and goddesses the ancient Greeks worshipped. Let's begin our story. Leonidas woke up early on the day of the foot races. Still lying in bed, he could hear his father Cyrus outside tending the horses. He's probably feeding them, Leonidas thought to himself, and then we'll harness them to the carts and make our way to Olympia. Olympia was the site of the day's foot races in honor of Zeus, the leader of all the Greek gods and goddesses. Leonidas and his father would take their pottery to sell to the people at the races, and when they had sold all they could, they would watch the races. Leonidas knew that if he asked, his father would tell him again how the gods and goddesses came to be, and why he and the other Greeks honored them with foot races, festivals, and feasts. It was his favorite story, and he loved to hear his father tell it. But first, Leonidas had to get out of bed and get dressed. Otherwise, he wouldn't get to hear the story or see the races at all. After breakfast, he went outside to help his father, Cyrus, who had just finished harnessing the first of their 2 horses to the cart. "Good morning, Father," Leonidas said. "Good morning, son. We're almost ready to go. Will you help me harness the last horse?" Leonidas nodded, and together, as the sun burnt away the morning fog, father and son harnessed the second horse. Once they double-checked that the horses were securely fastened to the cart, Leonidas and Cyrus finished storing their pottery safely in the cart. Then, taking their seats on a wooden plank at the front of the cart, they started their journey to Olympia. After they traveled some miles down the road, Leonidas asked, "Father, will you tell me again the story of the gods and goddesses?" "Of course, son. As you know, we're going to Olympia for the foot races held in honor of Zeus. Olympia is the home of an important sanctuary devoted to Zeus, where we celebrate him and the other Olympian gods and goddesses with sporting competitions. The 12 gods of Mount Olympus are the most powerful of all of the many gods, and Zeus is their leader. Of course, Mount Olympus is actually far away, but this is a beautiful valley, beloved to them and perfect for the games." Their cart went over a bump, and Cyrus turned around to check their wares briefly before continuing the story. "These gods and goddesses can sometimes be just like you and me. They can feel happy or sad, jealous and angry, or generous and loving. Unlike you or me, they have special powers to control things like the seasons and the weather, when and where there is war, and sometimes with whom we fall in love. And unlike you and me, the gods are immortal. That means they never die." Cyrus paused before continuing on with Leonidas' favorite part of the story. "That's how the gods are different from mortals on Earth. But do you know how to tell them apart from one another?" Leonidas did know, but he wanted his father to continue telling the story, so he said, "Yes, father, but tell me anyway." Cyrus continued on, saying, "Well, as I said before, Zeus is the leader of all the gods and protects all of us here on Earth. He has a voice like rolling thunder and controls the wind, rain, and lightning, which he also uses as his weapons. He has 2 brothers, Hades and Poseidon, and together they rule over the whole world. While Zeus controls the heavens, Poseidon controls the sea and rules over it with a trident. When he strikes the ground with his trident, the earth shakes, and when he strikes the seas with it, the waves rise up as tall as a mountain. Zeus and Poseidon are 2 of the 12 gods who live on Mount Olympus and have thrones there." Leonidas and his father came to a fork in the road and turned left. They could now see other carts ahead of them in the distance, other vendors looking to sell their wares at the foot races in Olympia. "And what about Hades, Zeus's other brother?" Leonidas asked. "While Zeus rules the heavens and Poseidon rules the sea, Hades rules the underworld, or the land of the dead. Hades has a helmet that makes him invisible so that no one, friend or foe, can see him coming. Hades' throne is in the underworld, where he lives," Cyrus said. "He sounds scary," Leonidas shivered. "Who else lives on Mount Olympus?" "Well," Cyrus said, "Zeus also has a sister who has a throne on Mount Olympus. Demeter is the goddess of the harvest and grain. She looks after all the fields and crops on Earth. Zeus's wife, Hera, also lives on Mount Olympus. She's the queen of the gods and goddesses and is the goddess of women's lives." How many is that?" Cyrus turned and asked his son. Counting on his fingers, Leonidas said, "Zeus, Poseidon, Demeter, and Hera. Just 4. Who are the other gods and goddesses who live on Mount Olympus?" "Well, there's Hephaestus, god of fire and the blacksmith of the gods. Aphrodite, goddess of love. Athena, goddess of wisdom. And Ares, god of war." Then there are the twins, Apollo, the god of light and music, and his sister Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. There's Hermes, the messenger of the gods, and finally Dionysus, the god of wine and the youngest of all the gods. Even though these are the most powerful of all the gods and goddesses, Zeus is the strongest of all, and it is he whom we honor today. Cyrus stopped the cart. They had finally reached Olympia. Spectators and vendors moved all around them as the athletes stretched in preparation for the races. Leonidas knew that many miles away was cloud-covered Mount Olympus. As the midday sun shone through some of the clouds, Leonidas imagined he could see the briefest glimpse or passing view of a palace with 12 golden thrones. Here are some discussion questions. Feel free to pause the video in order to allow time to think and discuss. What is the setting for this story? Why are Leonidas and his father tending to and securely harnessing the horses? Leonidas and Cyrus were going to the sanctuary at Olympia to sell their pottery and be spectators at the races held in Zeus's honor. What story did Cyrus tell Leonidas during their journey? How are the gods and goddesses similar to humans? How are they different? Which gods or goddesses can you remember from the read aloud? What are some of their special powers? Where did the Olympian gods and goddesses supposedly live? What did Leonidas think he glimpsed as he looked at Mount Olympus in the distance? Do you really think he saw this? Why or why not? You heard that Greek myths are fiction, or stories that are not true. How do you know they are fiction?